Hi, my name is Julie Reeder. I'm with Reeder Media, and I'm having a conversation today with my friend Mershan Shaddy. We've been friends for about 30 years. We were neighbors for 22 years in Fallbrook, and we had many, many conversations through the chain link fence and watched each other's kids grow up, get married, have babies, went through some pretty scary times together. And Mershan has always had a passion for health and nutrition, and I thought that it would be great to have a conversation with him, especially as the average American, myself, who's had several heart attacks, been obese, had polycystic ovarian syndrome, just lots of problems that are all lifestyle and diet related. So I'm committed to have a good year this year and get better, and Mershan is part of that puzzle. So Mershan, thank you for talking with me today. And why don't you give them a background, what you've been up to?
It's a long time.
Started in the military.
Yeah, it did. So that was 1966.
Mm-hmm.
I was a corpsman. I went into the Navy, and I had decided that that's what I wanted to do. You meet death, you make friends, you see them go away, you see things that are horrible.
Yeah.
So one thing you learn, that life is really precious, but it can go away in an instant.
Yeah. So you've been in the last 25 years in caring for people and as a nurse. So today, what is your passion today? You're retired at this point?
Yes.
Or not retired, but you're retired from that phase of your life. And you're still very passionate about nutrition and lifestyle and all that. And you have a theory that we are the ultimate adaptogen because we have control over what we put in our body, how much exercise we do. So talk to us about that.
So one of the reasons why when I ultimately left medicine, I was at odds with the process. And I related more to the physicians that came in. So at the end of 2024, I left and ended up having a lot of people talking to me. For 25 years, I worked in the emergency room. I worked in home health. I made home visits. I was uniquely equipped to do those things because right after I left school, I decided that journalism was a thing, and I got into sales and marketing. So that helped me extremely well in medicine because it was easy for me to relate to patients and communicate. And I had because of my military experience, because I worked directly with physicians in reality on SOQ 9, Sick Officers Quarter, 9th floor, was a thoracic and renal, kidney, and orthopedic floor. They told me everything. And they would give us things to do that were that were surgical in nature. We sutured, we did extensive dressing changes, but there was a lot of education that came into play while you are working with physicians. And it comes differently to you than it did over the last 25 years when you're working with nurses.
Right. And they're limiting what you can do.
Highly regimented.
Yeah.
Well, you can't talk about this, and you can't say this, and you can't do this, and you have to be careful. But I noticed that people did that anyway.
Yeah.
So I filtered later into I took my degree in licensed vocational nursing. I didn't really like that. It started out initially back in the day as licensed practical nurses, because we're the practical side of medicine.
Yeah. And I know you love that word. You're very practical about medicine and lifestyle, diet, exercise.
Life is practical.
Yeah.
Is it practical to jump in front of a car when you're crossing a street? No, it's not practical at all.
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody gets hurt and you're in the middle of nowhere and you happen to be there and you have knowledge, it's practical to help people.
Right.
That's what humans do.
Right.
We help each other.
Right.
We share information. We share data, I mean, that's how we all started in the very beginning.
Right.
We knew nothing. We had our smell, we had our eyes, we had our ears, and that led us to a tremendous amount of practicality. We had our taste. So if you smell something that's bad, and you are a, so to speak, caveman, and you're going to go up and eat something, aren't you going to smell it first?
Right.
If it smells bad, don't eat it.
Yeah.
Or if you're going to try it because you're starving, take a little taste. Let your taste filter
So things
into
are a little different now because things that could smell good and taste good may not be good for you to eat.
Yeah, because when you think of all the chemicals
Right.
that have unknowingly to the general public increased shelf life, they're like, some of them are forever chemicals.
Right.
They're going to stay in your system. So in the very beginning, we didn't have that. So what did we eat back then? And this is a story that, people are really becoming more and more familiar with. Because fundamentally, if it was a rabbit or however big the rabbit was back then, you had to kill it. That's where you got your satiation. You got your protein. And that's exactly how it happened. If it was shiny, and orange hanging on a tree or whatever fruit, attracted our attention, nature has its own designs. And they're set up in that fashion. I got to go kill that, I've got a family, I got to feed my family, I don't want them to starve, so let's go hunting. So that's where the hunter-gatherers, came into play. So over time, cultures, tribes, families, however they were organized, and anthropologists have let us know how they've been organized, all of their theories and things of that nature that says, this is how we did it. Well, that was stories then. Writings on cave walls. That's how they passed information on. And there are tribes today that a lot of nutritionists go to see how they're living. And all of them follow and have the large part of their diet is carnivore. But they eat vegetables and they eat fruit. But they don't really gorge on them.
Right.
The primary is that protein that they can get. So
And probably not so much pasta and bread and cookies.
there wasn't any then.
Baked goods.
Yeah, nobody knew that what was growing,
Yeah.
had a seed. And why would you eat seeds? When you think about it,
Yeah.
you would eat seeds. Why would you do that? Because if you're going to save your seeds, to grow in the future, so you'll have food in the future.
Yeah.
Those things are all practical. You're not going to eat your seeds, and really nobody did. But eventually, they crushed those seeds, and they made bread, and that was 10,000 plus now years ago.
Yeah. So what are things that we can do today to be healthy?
So this thing that you brought up about how I feel about human beings and who we really are, we are much like supplements, okay? Because supplements make us feel good. They improve things. So if you are go to the doctor and you have a lab exam, and the doctor's going to say, whoa, you're kind of low in this, you're low in that. So perhaps you might need some potassium.
Or iron?
Yeah. You might need, different.
Magnesium.
Beg your pardon?
Magnesium.
Yeah. You need a variety of minerals. But, today we're drinking out of plastic bottles, and we're learning a lot about plastics now, and we never knew about those things.
Yeah.
So But we took those supplements because a large majority of them are, we call them adaptogenics. They're adaptogens. They make us feel better. And so people would use those. However, they're not the ultimate adaptogen. Humans are. Because we're the ones that decide. Because every decision we make determines what happens next. It doesn't matter. So, of course, there can be intrusions by other people, you know, and so it might change your mind. Well, okay, that's not a priority right now. But overall, every decision we make determines what happens next. It's going to come at you one way or the other. So if you eat a piece of chicken and somebody cooked it, but it stayed out far too long and you got sick, what happened? You made a decision to eat that chicken. You smelled it and went, okay, maybe it doesn't smell right, but I'm really hungry. So I'm going to eat this. Okay, what comes next? A trip to the throne. You know, that's exactly what happens. Yeah, everybody's experienced it. Most everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, so why are we the ultimate adaptogen? Because it's decisions that we make.
It seems to me that some of these decisions are being made for us, though. You know, when we walk into a supermarket, it just seems like they're saying, buy this first.
That's right. That's right. You're surrounded.
Right. And also the new food pyramid, how they've tipped it upside down.
Finally.
For decades, we were being told to eat tons of grains and bread and all of that. Very little meat, very little fats.
Yeah.
And now that's turned upside down.
It is turned upside down, and I'm really glad.
And we're being told we need more protein.
I still want some things to spill out of that
It's okay to eat eggs again, from my understanding. It's
It
okay.
sounds counterintuitive that
Yeah.
we should eat more fat.
Right.
Everybody, especially
Yeah.
people who are on a diet, say, I can't eat fat.
Well, there are people that say, fat will make you fat. That's why they call it fat. No, that is not true.
No, yeah.
Fat
Sugar
is
will make
extraordinarily important.
Yeah.
It's very important. Fat
Yeah.
does save us in a lot of different ways. It stores toxic
Yeah.
elements, you know, in our body. And when those fat globules get too large, you know, they will spill out. So you got to wonder, how come we as children are so vital all the time when we're little? Adults, they go, oh my God, you know,
I'm so tired.
I'm so tired. I can't keep up with this kid.
Yeah.
He's 5 years old. He's running circles in my kitchen.
Yeah.
You know, I tell him to stop and he just runs down the hall, goes somewhere else. They're vital. But when we start turning, now it's a little bit earlier, but, you know, our grandparents, my grandparents, they held up pretty well, but they came from a different era.
Right.
Okay. But today, you know, 35, 40 years old that are heavier than they should be are
Yeah.
getting winded.
Right.
You know, they don't have energy and stamina, you know, and they think, what should I do? You know,
Yeah.
how can I get better? So they'll go to the doctor. The doctor will, you know, order a lab test, and then they'll make suggestions. Well, you need to do this, you need to do that. Eat a lot of fruits and vegetables and eat those healthy grains. Well, you know, it's been almost 50 years or more, and now they've flipped that triangle upside
Now
down.
we're sicker. We're the best, well-fed nation probably in the world, and we're the sickest.
Yeah. And it's largely because of the decisions that are made for us and the decisions that we make for ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's the practical side. And that's really my focus.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not so much, you know, vegan. I've never been a vegan. I've never considered myself a vegetarian. It doesn't mean that I've not
That you're doing
gone a
vegetables.
week trying it.
Yeah.
But I'm an inquisitor.
Yeah.
I ask a ton of questions. And now that we have AI, if we frame our questions properly, then you can get a fundamental answer that runs pretty true. However, if you don't have medical discernment, then that creates a problem all of in itself. Because how do you know what to, how do you know what's really true?
Well, also too, I think there's a personal aspect of that too, that everybody's a little different, and I think that's probably where medicine is going to go too. I think we're not so much stuck on the genetic makeup anymore as we used to be. Well, you're just, your genetic makeup is the reason that you got cancer or that you have heart disease or whatever. I think we know fundamentally that we are in charge of our own destiny more.
Well, just
that way.
because mom had cancer,
Yeah.
they finally come to the realization that that doesn't mean that you're going to have it.
Mm-hmm.
And just because your dad had a heart attack
Right.
doesn't mean that you're going to have it. Now, relationally speaking, you can understand that when you were a kid, if you continue to eat the same thing they did, that probably gave them a heart attack.
Right.
Well, you could be going
Right.
down that path. And that's one of the reasons
Yeah.
why they asked the question, because an intelligent, physician will bring that up to speed.
Yeah.
But they're running out of time now.
Yeah.
Now you go in and you see them for 15 minutes. What can you
Right.
get in 15
Right.
minutes?
Or 10 minutes.
Or 10
it's-
minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that comes up with me is, how do you know that you're even close to eating the right stuff each day, right?
Right.
Like, I feel like maybe I was low on vitamin D for a long time and just wasn't tracking it, right?
Yeah, right.
Stopped drinking milk, and then, or maybe I was eating too much protein,
Mm-hmm.
right? Taking those whey protein supplements, they're great, right?
Right.
Just add it, you got 150
But
grams
also-
of protein. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just have a little easy test, like a saliva test, that says you're correct today or you're wrong today.
Right, or yeah.
Yeah,
There's
that's
just
how
no way
they.
to know, right?
You're
Yeah, that's how they
low.
determine if you're in ketosis. So what they'll do is they'll give you a little
pea
lab
sticks.
strip,
Yeah.
and then you'll,
But even though you're in ketosis, it doesn't say that maybe
That your
you're missing
magnesium
your
levels
vitamin
are
C
good.
or something.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right.
There's
That's
no-
right.
You gotta eat meat or vegetables to get your vitamin
Yeah.
C, right?
Typically. But it's really interesting to know that all of the primary amino acids are in animal foods.
Yeah.
So salmon is really good for you. Red meat is good for you. It has all the fat in it that you need. But you want to make sure that you're sourcing food properly. So it's interesting. So if you eat, let's say your breakfast, whatever time you may have it, you get, say, 50 grams of protein. Okay? 50 grams of protein.
That's a lot.
What I do today is I try to get 100 grams of protein before noon.
Oh.
And I'll do that fundamentally around 10 o'clock. But because I'm kind of retired, I don't have to get up at the crack of dawn
Yeah.
anymore.
My goal is usually 30.
Yeah. So I was watching registered nutritionists when I was, active in hospitals and things of that nature. They would come in every morning. Every morning a patient would get their blood drawn. No rest, okay? Every morning, then the dietitian would show up, and they would look at the results of those lab tests, and they would align foods with the results that they saw in the lab tests. So there are minimums and maximums, but the data is changing now.
Yeah.
It's changing now. So, get me on the right path.
What do you think? What do you think about what, like Bricka does? The test that he does. He does the blood test.
Oh, Gary Brecka.
Yeah, Bricka.
Yeah. Gary Brecka is an interesting guy. He has a wonderful history. I like to think that we're kind of aligned, although we've never met each other.
Yeah.
But I followed him quite a bit because with all the experience, the time that I was in the military and the things that I learned from physicians, and then when you move and see people in civilian life that have issues. You know, I looked after all of my buddies during that time, and so
Yeah.
they all had issues, you know, and then you get into medicine and then you see what's actually happening. So Gary Brecka moves from a practical level,
Right.
but
But
the
it
practical
starts with
study.
a blood test, right?
But it will start with a blood test. Often they like he likes to do DNA because it tells stories of what's working and what's not working, and then they analyze it. But Gary Brecka was a biologist, and he calls himself a human biologist, which is super important. And he was exposed to he brought his knowledge to play when he worked for a insurance company, and
Right.
insurance companies when they look at key man insurance, you know, they're the leaders. They don't need to die, but they're insuring them for millions of dollars, because it all boils down to, if this person passes away, then what's going to happen to the company. So these were really critical. So he would study their medical record. They had to release their medical records. They had access to their medical records, all their lab tests and everything, and what medications they were on, so on and so forth. And these companies, you know, they have their actuarials
Yeah.
and they have their statistics. And once individuals like Gary Brecka finds out what that is, they can practically tell you within 6 months when you're going to pass away. And that's how they decide how they're going to insure you and how much it's going to cost you.
Okay.
So,
So, and then if I remember correctly, he was saying, why can't we tell people this information so that they can make adjustments?
yeah.
And they said, no, you
No,
can't.
there's an NDA involved.
Yeah, you can't.
You know,
tell
this
anybody.
non-disclosure agreement says,
Yeah.
sorry, you can't tell anybody. You know, and it challenged him for a long time. He didn't have to retire when he did.
Yeah,
You know, I'm sure he was highly successful.
yeah.
It feels like he was. And he makes sense, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I like that. So when I read books, you know, I always double check things. You know, I really can't, you know, I guess you could say fact check, but when you have insight and you've seen how things can work and how successful things can be, the
Yeah.
rudimentary,
How you can get healthy again.
yeah, is
Yeah.
in a hospital, it's hard. You don't really want to go into a hospital. You know, they have this thing called nosocomial infections. And a nosocomial infection is an infection that they get while they're in the hospital. And they don't like it, because what happens is that a physician or the nurse, who has also a responsibility, whether LPN, LVN,
Sure.
RN, nurse practitioner, PA, physician's assistant, when that person discharges and a physician gives them a prescription, just call it a blood pressure medicine, then that person is going to say, I want you to take this blood pressure medicine every so often. It can be twice a day, it can be once a day in the morning, it can be in the evening, it can be anything. Long story short, they really don't go into the details. So people will take their blood pressure medicine, and some blood pressure causes your heart rate to fall, you know. So if you don't take your blood pressure while you're at home before you take a particular medicine, depending on what it is, you could pass out. You could fall. And if a person's 60, 65, 70, 80, 90,
Yeah.
they'll pass out, they'll break a hip. And that could mark the end of their life. And that's
Yeah.
incredible. So when I worked in the ER, we had a big deal with Palomar. And, you know, they were really concerned. The physicians brought it up. They said, we got to figure out a way to make sure that we remind medical offices to make sure that people understand that. And
You know,
that-
I was told that last time I was given my blood pressure medicines I was I was asked to take my blood pressure, and if my blood pressure was
X.
below a certain or not to take it.
Yes.
So that was the first time anybody had ever told me that.
And they should.
Yeah.
But you know what? Time is such an important factor these days.
Yeah.
I mean, a physician sees somebody for 15 minutes.
Right.
You know, he says what he's going to say. He looks at the past tests that you may have had, you know, and he says, okay, I'm going to write this prescription, and then I'm going to hand it to you, or I'm going to give it to my nurse, and then you'll get some what we call discharge instructions.
Tell me, who are some of your favorite authors and or podcasters, doctors, YouTube guys that you think are helpful?
What got my attention was a book called The Epipaleo Prescription.
By Dr. Hyman.
No, it was a neurosurgeon by the name of Dr. Jack Kruse. And the things that he brought up when he wrote this book, it was 2013. As soon as I heard about it, I was going, okay, because I had a lot of questions. So ultimately, it was the prescription for disease reversal and optimal health. The things he wrote about in that book were really interesting. He said if your cholesterol falls below 200, you can ask any oncologist and they'll tell you you are ripe for cancer. And he printed it. Now, I know that a lot of people didn't like that.
Yeah.
You know, it started
That's
a lot of
contrary
pushback.
to what we hear, right?
That is very contrary. So, cholesterol is really important. So, but we manage it with food.
Yeah.
But we have to pay attention. It doesn't mean you can't have a piece of cake.
Yeah.
It just means that, you know, you don't want to eat the whole cake
Right.
because it'll inundate your body. You know, too much. It'll cause a spike in insulin that will hang out even after it's handled the insulin.
Yeah.
And because it's a hormone, it's going to affect a lot of other processes.
Okay.
So Dr. Jack Kruse, he set me in place. And it created a whole lot of questions. You know, he talked about things like, well, if your arteries and your veins get a little scarring because, you know, crystals pass through our body and it's going to make a mark. He explained to me how that happened just in reading his book. And that book is worn out.
Yeah.
I have purchased 2 other things and 2 other copies and I've given them away.
Yeah.
So, but that was 2013. Today, they're talking about everything that he talked about in that book.
Right.
He's fundamentally an outsider.
Yeah.
But he's the one that set me on my path because he is very cerebral. And it's almost like when he speaks, he has a photographic memory. And I used to always double check things and go back and mark them up. So he was my first introduction. And I started thinking, okay, I've got a lot of questions now.
Yeah.
Well, although he answered them, I wanted to see what his colleagues were saying. So it attracted me to a lot of people in YouTube because a lot of these physicians and some of these PhDs, some retired, some aren't. And it was really interesting who would say more than those that were still
The
in
retired
practice.
ones.
The retired ones,
Right.
they would say more.
Yeah.
They could stay more. They didn't have a license that was at risk.
Especially if it was during COVID.
Well, that's an interesting story all by itself.
Yeah. Okay.
When-
One of the things that one of the things that kind of woke me up. There was a couple of doctors. Early on my journey to figuring out all my problems, and when people weren't really talking about the things that we're talking about very much, because I think I don't know if people really knew fundamentally, but Dr. Bridgman, I remember at Graybill in town here, I was taking metformin for blood sugar, and he said, you know, you wouldn't have to take those, you can control all that with diet. And I was like,
yes, indeed.
really? Like, I'd never heard that before. This was in probably the late 90s. never heard that before. So I learned more about that, and then I was able to go off my metformin, and
One less pill.
yeah, but I later I still was having terrible problems with inflammation. And I was reading about it, researching it, finding that inflammation was like the root of all evil, and that was lifestyle related. And then there was, the possibility of cancer and all that. So one of the things that helped me was a Netflix special called "Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead," because I was just one big ball of inflammation. I mean, I had chronic urticaria. I was like, if I wore my
Itchy
jeans,
skin?
yeah, if I had my jeans too tight, I'd have a ridge of red raised skin all around me. Or if I clapped my hands would swell up. If I had my sunglasses on behind my ears, I was just everything where there was pressure, I would get inflamed. And when I went to the doctor, they were like, "Oh, we really don't know what causes this." Well, I figured it out, that it was inflammation and it was diet related. But part of that Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, who I think Dr. Hyman did, I think he was involved with that guy too, was very telling. The guy was able to stop all his medications after a while just because he was eating real food and he was juicing and all that. And then I had edema in my legs, especially my right one, and you could push your finger in and get an imprint. I mean, how weird is that? And I asked a young doctor about that when I was in for a heart attack at the hospital, and I said, "What causes that?" And he was like, "It's just normal for your age." Really?
Yeah,
So,
not normal.
we just have to be informed, and we have to take responsibility for our own health. And if you have a broken bone or a heart attack, you need to go to the hospital or go to the doctor. But fundamentally, we need to eat right and exercise.
Yeah. So, going back to inflammation.
And I'd like to say I don't have any edema now. My edema's gone.
Well, that's good.
Another step in the right direction.
So, but that redness around your waist,
Yeah.
that was probably a latex sensitivity.
I did have latex sensitivity too.
And that in itself is going to cause an inflammatory response. But here's the thing. There are two,
But I love avocados.
well, that's a good thing.
Love
Eat as many as
avocados
you
and-
can.
Yeah, but they have latex.
But we had a dog on our on the street that we both lived on way back in the day called Sandy, and that's all she did.
Yeah,
Ate avocados off the trees
yeah,
on our street, and she got pretty fat.
yeah,
But that's a lot of avocados because she ate other things
yeah.
besides
Yeah.
just that avocado. So avocados are particularly good for you. So the thing is that, so what causes inflammation?
Well, see, I don't think I have those allergies and sensitivities anymore. Because I'm healthier now.
Yes, because you have what your body needs in order to fight it, and because you have been making a switch and eating things that the body recognizes, that's what's really important.
Right.
Because if the body doesn't recognize it,
Yeah.
it really doesn't know what to do with it.
And I think what was causing the inflammation was too many carbs and sugar.
Yeah.
So once I learned I needed to cut out, I was just trying to eat cheaply and trying to eat inexpensively. And I grew up in a household where we ate a lot of carbs and a lot of sugar, cereal, rice for breakfast, things, so those caused problems that we didn't know they were causing.
Yeah. So certain foods have omega-6s, okay? Omega-6s are important to the body. If you only eat omega-6s are what signal the body that you have an inflammatory response, okay? It's a warning. So when you have that inflammation, that's a signal, because we have receptors on every cell in our body and signals that the body needs, and it's the communication from our big toe all the way up to our ears. And it tells us that we have to do something, and that's part of the decision-making process. But you have to know what to do,
Right.
and that's the key factor. So what do you have to do? You have to take in a little bit more omega-3s, because omega-3s help offset the excessive inflammatory response. So in the Mediterranean diet, what do they use
Olive oil.
it's olive oil.
Yeah.
That offsets the some of the foods that most people can be sensitive to. So that's the offsetting thing. But omega-6 are important. Where do you find omega-6s? You can get them in bacon. You can get them in pork. Comes from the same animal. Okay? The pork has only one stomach. The cow has 7. I mean, 4.
Four.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Has 4. So the whole point of that is that you don't want to eat too much, but it's not going to kill you as long as you take care of the offsetting nutrients that do it. And they're all contained in meat, fish, eggs, chicken, all the animal foods. No matter what, if all you ever ate was eggs, you would be healthy.
You'd be fine.
You would be fine. Okay? There's a lot of stories. Earlier on you mentioned something that, everybody's kind of different. Well, that all depends on what happens during childbirth. But for the most part, everything gets handled all up until things start to change. And they start to change right about 25. But lately,
Yeah.
they've been changing as their kids. Because there's
Yeah,
all
it's
kinds of
earlier.
things that we don't, that we're learning, okay?
Yeah.
That we're learning. So medicine can get really complicated, but if you get wrapped up in all the complications, you might not do anything. You might
Right,
say, the
right.
hell with it, I'm just going to eat what I want, and see what happens next.
Yeah.
So for the most part, if an individual minimizes the carbs, because what are carbs? It's just another name for sugar.
Yeah.
And there are 3 levels of sugar. People don't normally know that. Some of the sugar goes right into your blood, but that's not where it belongs. The body will make sugar, all the sugar that it needs, without having any carbs or without having any, sugar at all. It'll take it and it'll manufacture it from fat. That's why fat's so important,
Yeah.
because fat saves us in a whole lot of ways. And, we could get into a lot of depth, but the issue is that you can't get wrapped up in listening to a lot of these podcasts, okay, while the people that I pay attention to have extensive knowledge. One of the things that's very difficult, but makes it easier for me than the average person, if you will, is I have a medical background. I have heard a lot of the terminology, and I have heard people shouldn't eat this. Well, look what they ate,
Yeah.
And they come in the ER and they get treated and they have to swallow carbon.
Yeah.
It's just like, bring it on. And you see people walking around with their lips, and we're giving people antidotes for over, too many opioids, things of that nature. But these are decisions
Yeah.
that we all have to make.
So, Mersham, thank you very much for the conversation. Let's do it again next week.
A little bit of a surprise, but,
Yeah.
it was fun.
Yeah.
People need to know what they should know.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be complicated.
You know what? I would like to also ask people what they think would be important and interesting to talk about. And then maybe we can find experts in those fields.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good idea.
yeah. So anyway, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Have a great week.
Yeah, there's so much to dig into when you start talking
Oh,
about
yeah.
things like this.
Oh yeah, it's great.